Well, I'm pleased to be here today with Matt Cook, Executive Director of the Center for Healthy Churches, to introduce you to him and him to you. So,
Hey everybody.
we look forward to learning about you and your role in the transition, this very important time in our journey. So we're going to get right to the very important questions.
Oh,
you
okay,
ready?
great. I'm ready.
Favorite food?
Mexican food. Do I need to narrow it down more than that?
That works okay. Color?
Red.
Red. What's your favorite song?
I still haven't found what I'm looking for by U2.
Ooh, you want to sing it for us?
I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
And now you're here to Knollwood to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's
What
right.
about your superpower?
Ooh. Serious or funny?
Whatever. Funny, I think.
My spiritual gift is choosing the right restaurant for the right group of people.
What a spiritual gift that is. We
Yeah,
look
that's-
forward to your sharing that
Okay,
with
yeah.
us. So now that we've gotten past those very important questions, let's get down to the business here. So tell us about the Center for Healthy Churches.
Sure. So we've been around for about 10 years as an organization. There are 37 of us across the country, literally across the country, Oregon down to Florida, California to upstate New York. Increasingly ecumenical. We were Baptist when we started, or at least the people who did the work were Baptist, but now there's 7 different denominational traditions, 7 or 8. 8 different denominational traditions, but multiple Baptist groups are represented, if that makes sense. So, anyway, so it's a wonderful organization. Our primary focus is to try to help churches in the midst of, like, 21st century church is challenging, so church is sailing into the wind right now. So we see our role as trying to help churches figure out how to adapt and thrive in the midst of kind of some challenging circumstances.
So what are some of the most challenging circumstances you find when you're consulting with the church?
The big challenge right now for the American church is we are going from being centered to being decentered, right? Like, we used to be power brokers in American culture. Religion used to be a far more significant influence. And I know politically there's that plays out differently, because certainly religion and politics, that's a messy conversation, and some people would say religion is inserting itself into our political life maybe in ways that it shouldn't. But as it relates to the church as an institution, it is unquestionable to say that statistically speaking, the American church is in a season of numerical decline. In almost any measure that we look at, 9 out of 10 American congregations are smaller than they used to be. People go to church less often. All this data tells us that people see religion as less important in their daily lives as they used to. And you put all that together, and functionally what that means for the church is the church is trying to learn how to do what it does without the influence, without the resources that it used to have. And that's a really, really challenging thing. The analogy I often use is newspapers. In the 20th century,
Heard a few of those myself.
like, a lot of people would read newspapers, right? They would have a daily delivered newspaper. Like, that was a way that we got our news, and it was woven into the fabric of our lives. And information's not less important, but the way we get our news is not the same. So if you're in the newspaper industry in the 21st century, it's a whole lot harder. It's a whole lot more challenging than it was in the 20th century. Well, spirituality is not less important for people. People aren't asking, they're still asking spiritual questions, but the church as an institution is just not as big of a deal in that process anymore.
And so things are done differently.
They're done
You
differently.
have to kind of pull out the difference for different congregations. You mentioned the ecumenicism of the center, and many people here at Knollwood were not raised Baptist, and a growing number. This is their first Baptist church.
Right.
What is different about the Baptist way of transition and seeking pastors. Often people would call us pastor snatchers and sneak around and those kinds of things. What is different and what is special about the way that Baptist churches find their next pastor?
That's funny. I've been involved in congregational ministry in some shape, form, or fashion for 30 years, and that's the very first time I pastor snatcher. I like that.
Oh, we were accused of that.
I guess I could be reasonably accused of being a pastor snatcher, but the big thing for Baptist churches is it's congregational.
Mm-hmm.
We say we want this process to be radically congregational, which is to say, while there is a pastor search committee that you've elected, and those people have a very significant role, that really for this process to work in the way that it's supposed to work, and we would say the way that it works best, not just in Baptist churches, by the way, is that the congregation, that their thoughts, their values, like what matters most to them is the critical information that we use in this process. And so there isn't a bishop that's going to decide who the next pastor is. The congregation is going to get to say what's important to them, and then the pastor search committee will take that information and use that to figure out who the next pastor is. So that's a great thing. We have hard data about that. The data indicates that a season of transition for a congregation, not just Baptist churches, but any church, it's going to go really well. It's going to enable the church to build momentum rather than just kind of survive and hunker down for a season. And the way that churches build momentum in a transition is that the congregation is instrumentally involved in the process.
And I think we're very excited about that. And we're about to see the example of the 3 meetings that we will have starting March the 2nd, also April 6th and April 27th. That's our first advertisement about that. Tell us a little bit about those meetings and why people should come to those congregational meetings and why they should come to all of them.
Okay. And the short answer is you're going to be asked something that your answer to the question is going to help chart the future course of your congregation. Like, those aren't just perfunctory. Like, what the things that people say are going to be critical information that the pastor search committee is going to use in the process of choosing your next pastor.
So your voice does matter.
Absolutely matters. It matters a lot. So I just finished working with a pastor search committee in Texas, and we just had what's called the writing retreat of the pastor profile. And for 2 weeks, what everybody on the pastor search committee was doing is they were going back and they were laser focused on what the congregation said as they were doing the work of kind of creating these profile statements that kind of that they use to look for their next pastor. I always say we got to show our homework, and showing our homework means we base it on what the congregation said. So come, because what you say really does matter.
And they'll hear their voice.
Yes.
and see their voice in the
Yes.
profile. How would those meetings be different? At each meeting, will they cover different things,
Yeah.
different aspects?
Yes,
Tell
in
us
fact,
about
they're
that.
all very different. The first one, they're focused on the past, present, and future. The first one is primarily a storytelling event in which we ask people to talk about the kind of critical and life-giving moments in their association with the church, and we use those to surface a set of enduring values for Knollwood. So what we'll get out of that is some things that need to be true, that are true and need to stay true
So
about Knollwood.
retain the values.
Even as you call a new pastor, you're not burning down everything that you already are. You actually are starting with what is our kind of core DNA, and that's what the first one's designed to do. Second one, it's probably the most mentally demanding because we cover a lot of ground in the second one. We call it the mirror and the window. We look in the mirror in the first half of the second conversation. We look at a lot of internal data about the church, and then we let people respond to what they see. And then we look outside, that's the window part, in the surrounding context, what's taking place around the church. How is the community changed? And what is that implications does that have for the church? And then tell us why you're focused on whatever demographic change is taking place. That's the second conversation. And then the third conversation is when we really focus hard on the traits that we're looking for in the next pastor. But we do that in light of what we've already said in the first conversation.
Okay, so it builds, each one builds on the other.
It builds.
So that's why it's so important that people attend all three, if at all possible.
You can miss one, and it's not like I would say, don't feel like if you miss the first one that you shouldn't come to the second or the third one. They're each independent experiences that give critical information. But in every single one of them, we ask important questions that are going to shape the future of the church.
So this sounds like an integral part of the consulting process, these kinds of meetings. What else does the center do to help Knollwood in this time of transition? What else will you be doing?
I'll try to give the Reader's Digest version of that.
Because we'll be learning more as we go along.
Yeah,
so just briefly.
Helping with the self-study, which is what the three conversations are, is certainly a part of that. Helping the pastor search committee in the process of forming first a congregational profile and then a pastor profile is another big part of that. The old Baptist way of doing it in the 20th century was pastor resigns or retires. You call a pastor search committee. The very first thing they do is they send out a survey and they ask, what are you looking for? What do you want in a next pastor? And what would happen is you'd get this mile-long list of things that people wanted, and you couldn't find a human being capable of living out that list.
Jesus, maybe?
Not
even
if
Jesus.
you glued Wonder Woman and Jesus together, right? Or Superman and Jesus together, you couldn't find that person. And so one of the big things that we do is we work with the pastor search committee to really hone down to a very kind of tight list of things that are important. And to then when you look at it, the answer, we ought to be able to go, a real person exists that is capable of doing these things. Mm-hmm. So that's a really critical thing that we do. And then later in the process, what we will do is we'll help find some candidates that meet that profile description.
So a vetting process.
Yeah, we don't choose your next pastor for you. The way I would say it is we speed up the search process. So we go and find really high quality candidates that fit the profile, and then we get out of the way. And then the search committee takes it from there, knowing that they're starting with there may be some candidates that come in through other mechanisms too. So I'm not trying to say the only candidates that your search committee will look at will be ones that we hand over, but they know that they're going to begin the process with some really high capacity candidates that are part of their overall candidate pool. So,
well, again, all this sounds very exciting for us. So what's the most rewarding part of consulting for you?
I get to work with a lot of churches, and so I like that. I like getting to have a broad impact. In this work, pastor transitions are very, I don't know if everybody knows the word liminal, right? Maybe Knollwood seems like the kind of church where people know what the word liminal means, but this in-between space that's sacred and important. I was just working with your staff team, and I said, I felt like if we could, we ought to start every single pastor transition during Advent, because the best analogy I have for this is a pregnancy, right? Like it's
intriguing.
Yeah, like you know that something important is coming. You know there's a big moment of change that is a few months down the road. It's not here yet, so it's a season of preparation. It's a season of waiting. It's a season of expectation. It's a season of a little discomfort, but that discomfort is life-giving. And so what I get to do is I get to kind of walk beside that process, and it's rewarding. It's rewarding it to see a church, first to see a pastor search committee, and then a church fall in love with the person they didn't even know beforehand. And then I'm not saying this to brag, it's just, but it's an answer to your question. By and large, like, it doesn't just go well in the moment, it continues to go well. And so to go back 5 years later and it's going really, really well, and we don't make it happen. The search committee is really more important to the process than I am. But just getting to walk beside it of that moment and then to continue to see it be blessing is pretty cool.
And to continue seeing the congregation
Yeah.
thrive. So circling back, your spiritual superpower. Not the funny one, but the spiritual one. What would that be in closing?
I guess this is spiritual. I am almost impossible to offend.
Oh, that's helpful. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try you. No one likes to try the boundaries, stretch the boundaries.
I have been very blessed to have had a lot of different influences, a lot of people from different kind of places in the church, and even kind of some different theological trajectories that have been that have blessed me and have been life-giving for me. And I think maybe that that opportunity has given me a pretty healthy approach to being able to listen broadly and to find value from a lot of different sources. So and so I find myself able to sustain conversations with people with pretty significantly different viewpoints. So
well, we look forward to that. So thank you very much, and we look forward to learning more about you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.